building a family ministry is great, but we know this is not something that just happens by accident. What are some of the first steps that are needed to begin this type of ministry?
Well, I think a lot of family ministers, student ministers, children's ministers have processes already in place that can be enhanced a little bit to minister to parents. So, for example, communication, and these are small ways and not very obvious ways to minister to parents, but communication is a big thing. So when you're sending emails to remind families about camp, registration, any kind of registration, send more than one. And don't expect them to read any of them. So don't be frustrated when they don't read any of your emails, or just put yourself in the shoes of the parents. So adding in extra ways to communicate to parents really ministers to them. One other way is many of our student ministers have processes to train their small group leaders. Well, maybe even in that process of training your small group leaders, add in an element of the small group leader contacting the parent and introducing themselves and just saying, "Hey, I'm your student's small group leader. Here's a little bit about me, and here's my contact information if you need anything from the small group leader." I think those are some ways to get it started. Another way to begin to implement parent ministry is through getting your leadership on board, talking to your leadership about it, just making a plan with them, but starting small. Mm-hmm. Those are just a few ways to begin building a great parent ministry.
And I want to jump back to something you said right at the beginning of that, because I think this is really important. You didn't mention just demolishing everything you already have and just tearing it all down and starting over. You talked about working within what's already in place, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There are so many little ways that churches, not just in the family ministry, but churches as a whole, can begin building in ways to minister to parents. I have another idea. So, depending on how your church is structured, oftentimes parents could be invited into the big decisions that their students make. So baptism, maybe the first time a teenager, or the one time that a teenager gets baptized, why not include the parent? If the parent is a believer, if the parent has been baptized, then why not invite the parent to do it? If a teenager is making a first-time decision to follow Christ, or even to go into ministry, include the parent in on that. Don't let it be an afterthought, or the parent hears about their student following Christ for the first time through the grapevine. Include them in the conversations.
Yeah, that's really good, because I love that idea that we don't necessarily just have to start over from scratch,
right. Mm-hmm.
Because change is hard and change is uncomfortable for people.
Absolutely.
And so I love that you've basically kind of put a model out there that says work within what you already have, and that takes a lot of pressure off ministers.
Right.
That's really good. Now, when we are doing this, though, it's inevitable. There are going to be some speed bumps along the way. We're going to kind of hit some roadblocks. We may hit some resistance. What are some of the most common speed bumps that churches are going to have to work through when they begin implementing family ministry?
Right. Well, I think also inevitably you will be inviting your parents to something, whether that's an event or a class. One of the common speed bumps that we have experienced at Oak Hills is getting parents to the building. And that can be hard, but they want it because you've been listening to the things that they need, the information that they need, the way they need to be ministered to. It sometimes just requires them to come to the building. The first time we ever intentionally did an event for parents, I prepared for, I think, 60 parents to come, and I had 2. It was like one of those moments where you think back and you're like, I don't ever want to think about that again. Yeah. But we pushed forward because we knew ministering to parents is really important. They are the primary spiritual influence in their child's life, and so we have to be intentional about that. So don't let that speed bump stop you from continuing to minister to parents. It's important to keep moving forward, to keep trying again, and they'll come. They'll come.
And I want to finish by asking you about how we can evaluate this, because sometimes if we're not careful, we can look at things as a failure if the numbers don't show right. Like you mentioned, inviting 60 people and like
Yeah.
3%
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah.
And when that happens, if we're only numbers based, then it looks like, well, we failed in that regard. But
Right.
we know that's really not how it
Right.
should be evaluated. But how do we evaluate our ministry to make sure that it is effective?
Yeah. Well, first, I think we need to understand that it's not going to be immediate to know if something is effective or not. It takes time, and you follow up with parents, listen to them, hear the stories of how whatever program it was, whatever class, whatever it was, impacted their life. What takeaways did they get from it? How are they applying it to their families? That's key. How are the tools and the practical ideas that they received, how are they applying it? If they're like, I can't apply it, well, that's tells you right there it wasn't necessarily that effective. But it takes time, and we just have to listen to our families.